In Europe, there are the so-called virtuous countries, like Denmark or the Netherlands. They're the ones with their books in order. But Norway is a completely different case, because the virtuous countries are like a person with a great salary. They work hard and put something aside at the end of the month. Norwegians, on the other hand, do not rely solely on their salary. They live off returns, a colossal stream of income that comes from the oil and gas they sell to the rest of the world. And usually the conversation stops there. "Ah, now I see why," everyone says. They have the oil. But that's the half-truth that hides the real secret. The true Norwegian miracle was not finding black gold, but deciding how to use it. A ruthless and brilliant strategy, built on two shouted no's in the face of the European Union, and an inadvertent, but extremely wealthy, yes that came straight from Vladimir Putin. In this episode of the Inside Your Country series, we'll discover why, while the whole of Europe is struggling with inflation, interest rates, and an energy crisis that has crippled our industries, Norway is living through a historical paradox. Never before has Oslo been so rich, obscenely rich. Welcome to Amazing Europe. To understand today's miracle, we must erase the mental image you have of Scandinavia. Forget the Teslas and the glass skyscrapers. Let's jump back to the 1950s. Norway was not the prosperous north. It was Sweden's poor relation. While Stockholm was producing fighter jets and Volvo cars, Oslo's economy rested on three basic things: fishing, timber, and shipping. The nation still wore a terrifying demographic scar. Between the 19th and 20th centuries, hunger had driven almost 1 million Norwegians to emigrate to America. Proportionally, only Ireland had experienced a worse exodus. In short, it was a marginal country, burdened by a deep inferiority complex toward its neighbours. Then, in 1962, the Americans arrived. Phillips Petroleum knocked on the Norwegian government's door with an offer that seemed generous: $160,000 a month for exclusive rights to the Norwegian part of the North Sea. If Norway had signed that deal, today it would be an economic colony of the multinationals, not unlike certain African or South American states. Instead, the unthinkable happened. A visionary bureaucrat named Jens Evensen persuaded the government to reject the monopoly offer. On May 31st, 1963, Norway declared absolute sovereignty over the sea and rewrote the rules of the game. No one will have exclusivity. If you want our oil, you will have to compete on our terms. Notice the genius. They nationalized the resources before they even knew whether the oil was there. They bought the winning ticket before the lottery existed. The American companies, eager to take part, lowered their heads and accepted the limited drilling permits set by Oslo. And fortune, in the end, rewarded the bold. By 1969, after years of dry holes, the companies were desperate. Phillips, which had been granted one of those licenses, wanted to leave, but the Norwegian government, fortified by those ironclad agreements, dug in, insisting, "You must honour the contract to the very last metre." Forced to drill reluctantly on December 23rd, the day before Christmas Eve, the Ocean Viking platform's drill struck the Ekofisk field. It is one of the largest offshore fields in history. But here, the real difference between Norway and a failed petrostate like Venezuela becomes clear. Venezuela nationalised the wells, drove out foreign experts, and put party loyalists in charge, destroying efficiency. Norway did the opposite. Under the discreet guidance of an Iraqi geologist who had emigrated to Oslo, Farouk al-Qasim, the government put the multinationals in a steel grip. The message to the Americans was brutal. "You want our oil? Fine. But we don't just need your money, we want your know-how." They legally required foreign companies to use Norwegian suppliers and, above all, to train them. They forced the American giants to teach Oslo's fishermen how to build the most advanced offshore platforms in the world. They didn't just collect royalties, they stole the know-how. That is how Statoil was born, now Equinor. They used American money to learn how to do without the Americans. So, they found oil and learned how to extract it. Normally, at this point, what economists call the resource curse kicks in. Governments start spending like drunken sailors, inflation explodes, And, at the first collapse in the price of a barrel, the country collapses with it. Norway looked straight at this trap and made a choice no politician in the world likes to make. It decided not to touch the money. Until 1996, oil revenues were used only to plug holes and pay off past debts. But in May 1996, the first historic transfer was made to a new special account, the Government Pension Fund Global. Be careful, don't picture it as a Scrooge McDuck-style vault stuffed with cash. It's an aggressive financial octopus. The fund takes the dollars earned from oil and invests them in global markets, betting big. Almost 70% of the portfolio is in equities. The result is staggering. Today, the fund manages around $1.7 trillion. Pause for a moment and think about that number. If tomorrow morning the government decided to liquidate everything and split the spoils, every single Norwegian citizen, from newborn to centenarian, would see a transfer of over $300,000 land in their account. To give you a sense of their power, this single entity owns 1.5% of all the publicly listed shares on planet Earth. If you have an iPhone in your pocket, Norway owns a piece of it. If you drive a Fiat or a Mercedes, they're shareholders. If you eat a Nestlé bar, they profit too. They have literally bought a share of global GDP. But piling up money isn't enough. The real genius lies in how they spend, or rather, don't spend, this money. This is where the handlingsregelen comes into play, the action rule. It works like a watertight dam. The oil billions cannot flow into the state budget. The government is allowed to withdraw each year only the expected real return of the fund, set at 3%. In plain terms, eating the hen, the capital, is forbidden. You're only allowed to eat the eggs, the returns. This mechanism has made Norway immune to crises. In 2022, while Europe was shaking under the weight of inflation, Oslo maintained iron discipline, withdrawing even less than 3% to avoid overheating the economy. An astonishing level of accounting coolness. And this prosperity finances an exclusive club. It's true, taxes on citizens are high, but Norwegians pay them without complaint because they know where the money goes. It's not a forced levy, it's a membership fee that guarantees excellent healthcare, free education, and a total safety net. We can say that the system's main asset isn't money, it's trust. It sounds like an abstract concept, but it has enormous economic value. In a country where citizens trust the state and the state trusts its citizens, tax evasion is almost non-existent and bureaucracy is stripped to the bone. The whole system costs less and works better. It's a sealed social contract. I pay everything, you protect me from everything. But be careful. This obsession with total control, this iron will to manage one's own resources without external interference, doesn't apply only to the domestic economy. It's the exact same mindset that, twice over, led Norway to make a choice the rest of the continent judged insane, slamming the door in the face of the European Union. So Norway accumulates money and trust. But there is a third pillar holding up this fortress, and it's a political choice that the rest of the continent has judged for years as sheer madness. Twice, in 1972 and in 1994, the government asked its citizens in a referendum, "Do you want to join the European Union?" And twice, the Norwegian people answered, "No, thank you." Why? It wasn't a romantic choice, but a brutally economic calculation, and the main reason had gills. You need to know that joining the EU means accepting the common fisheries policy. National waters become in part accessible to all members through a quota system decided in Brussels. For Norwegians, seeing Spanish or French trawlers legally accessing their extraordinarily rich economic zones was unacceptable. The reasoning was simple. The political advantages of sitting in Brussels were not worth the loss of sovereignty over their natural resources. Fish first, oil later. But be careful, Norway did not isolate itself like North Korea. They found a brilliant compromise, perhaps the best asymmetric deal in modern history: membership in the EEA, European Economic Area. In practice, Norway bought a VIP pass to the single market. They can sell goods and services in Europe without tariffs, as if they were members. In exchange, they pay the EU a hefty annual contribution, hundreds of millions of euros, and commit to adopting much of European legislation on the environment, labour and safety. Critics call it democracy by facts. Brussels decides the rules and Oslo applies them in silence without having any say in the vote. It sounds like submission, right? Instead, it's the deal of the century. Because by agreeing to comply with Brussels on thousands of commercial regulations and industrial standards, from product labelling to workplace safety, Norway secured the only thing that truly mattered, keeping fisheries, agriculture and energy resources outside EU control. They bought market access, but kept the keys to the safe. And there's one last advantage: the currency. By staying out, they kept the Norwegian krone. Not having the euro allowed their currency to float freely. When oil prices collapse, the krone automatically weakens, making other exports, like fish, more competitive. Their currency acts as a natural shock absorber that the euro could never have provided. For 30 years, European bureaucrats looked at them with condescension, seeing them as lucky egoists. But history has a sense of irony. Because when war breaks out in 2022 and Europe finds itself in panic, Norway is there, hands-free, resources under its exclusive control and no need to coordinate with 27 quarrelling governments. The splendid isolation was about to turn into the greatest strategic advantage since the discovery of oil. But before we reveal how Norway managed to capitalise on the war, if you found this video informative, we kindly ask you to support our project by liking the video, subscribing to the channel and clicking the bell so you don't miss our new uploads. And we'd also like to remind you of our new channel, America vs. Europe, where we rank all European countries, the United States and Canada according to different factors. If Norway's story were a film, 2022 would be the final plot twist. But to truly understand what happened, we must not look at the start of the war. We need to go back to 2014, the year of the events in Crimea. At that moment, Europe, instead of reducing its dependence on Russia, increased it by building Nord Stream 2. Moscow was the undisputed energy master, controlling over 40% of all the gas imported into the European Union. Norway was a solid number 2, holding steady at 20 to 25%. But while Berlin and Brussels were tying themselves to Putin, Oslo was doing the opposite. It was investing. In those very years, Norway was developing Johan Sverdrup, a massive oil field in the North Sea, and expanding its gas infrastructure. When, in February 2022, Russian tanks rolled into Ukraine and the West responded with sanctions, Europe woke up in panic. Russian taps were shut off. The continent faced the risk of industrial freeze. It was at this exact moment that Norway's strategy paid the highest dividend in history. Within a few months, Oslo ordered the state company Equinor to suspend maintenance and pump at full capacity. Europe's energy map was rewritten. Russia's market share collapsed vertically. Today, at the end of 2025, it has been reduced to a marginal, barely 10%. In its place, Norway ascended the throne. Today, Oslo is Europe's #1 supplier, covering over 30% of the continent's gas demand, with peaks of 40% in some critical months. They replaced Moscow not only in the pipelines, but in geopolitical power. But while volumes increased, it was prices that changed the course of history. Here we need a cold economic analysis. Norway did not set prices. Prices were set by the Amsterdam market, driven mad by fear of shortages. When gas went from €20 to €300 per megawatt hour, Norway did not offer friends discounts. It sold at market price. Being outside the EU, Oslo did not have to answer politically to anyone. While Italian and German consumers saw their bills triple, Norwegian coffers were filling at a speed never seen before. Let's look at the numbers, because they are shocking. In a normal year before the crisis, the Norwegian state took in an average of around 300 billion kroner from the oil sector. In 2022, revenues shattered every record, reaching the astronomical figure of almost 1,500 billion. We're talking about more than 110 billion euros net in a single year. Revenues literally quintupled compared to the historical average. In 12 months, Norway earned the equivalent of 5 years of work. It was, technically, the largest net transfer of wealth from European citizens to a foreign state in modern history. And even though panic subsided in 2023, profits remained above 700 billion, more than double the old normal. All of this did not go unnoticed. Polish Prime Minister Morawiecki went so far as to call these gains unjust, speaking of war profits that should have been shared to rebuild Ukraine. The Economist dubbed Norway the accidental war profiteer. Oslo's response was icy and pragmatic. We guarantee security. Without our gas, Europe would be in the dark. We are a reliable partner. We do not use energy as a political weapon the way Putin does. But the price is what it is. Translated, we're selling you the lifeboat. Don't complain if it's expensive. By December 2025, the situation had stabilized, but on a new normal. Prices had fallen from their insane peaks, yet remained structurally higher than in the past. And Norway continues to churn out record profits, having now tied the European economy to its pipelines for the next 20 years. The war in Ukraine thus became the greatest accelerator of wealth in Norwegian history. A tragic conflict that redrew the map of power, transforming Oslo from a wealthy neighbour into an indispensable and now strategically untouchable guardian of Europe's energy survival. By now, one thing must be clear. Norway's wealth is not just luck. It is a masterwork of state engineering. It is a construct held up by three pillars no other country has managed to combine: a ruthless resource nationalism, an almost religious fiscal discipline, and a geopolitical cynicism that has managed to turn every European crisis, from the EU referendums to the war in Ukraine, into an advantage for Oslo. But the final question is, can this party last forever? On paper, time is working against them. The world is, painfully, trying to abandon fossil fuels. Sooner or later, Europe will stop buying gas and oil. That should terrify a petrostate. But Norway, once again, got ahead of the game. By turning oil into equities, they exchanged a finite physical resource for a financial asset that regenerates. Even if the age of oil ended abruptly tomorrow, they have already built the most expensive parachute in human history: $1.7 trillion invested in the world's future. They are safe inside their gilded stronghold. What remains is to understand what you think about the moral side of this wealth. And this is where we want to hear your opinion in the comments. Do you think Norway should redistribute part of these immense war profits to help rebuild Ukraine, as many European politicians demand? Or does a government have the duty to put its own citizens first without giving handouts to anyone? And above all, in hindsight, were they right to slam the door in the face of the European Union? If you found this video interesting, we recommend watching this other one, where we ranked all European countries by their residents' purchasing power. That's it for this video. See you next time.